Hello and welcome to the 47 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. This evening's episode brought to us by our good friends at S2 Cognition. S2 Cognition delivers a revolutionary approach to helping athletes understand how in-game decisions impact their performance from youth levels all the way to the pros. The Alabama quarterback became a very rich man last week because of his S2 Cognition score. In baseball, we as hitters, we want to take the balls and we want to swing at the strikes. And if we do that, we will do well. And that is called decision making. So S2's got a great approach to that whole decision making part of the game. It's awesome stuff. And we appreciate that partnership. So far tonight, I am joined by, two of the great humans in the state of North Carolina, Joe Healy and Aaron Fitt. Gentlemen, good evening. How you doing?
Hello there.
Hi, Runes. We're doing
I think
great.
that's indisputable. Two of the greatest humans in North Carolina. I don't know how long that list is, but we're definitely on it.
We're on
somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Big week, by the way. Big week for S2 Cognition around the draft. Felt like that was heard that name quite a bit.
They got a lot of pub, didn't they? What's the quarterback's name? Something Young, right?
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young. I keep wanting to call him Bryant Young. Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard the name all over. There's a lot of good pub for S2 Cognition last week.
Fitzy, when you go pro as a golfer, when you retire up your writing cleats and you go pro as a golfer, do you think you would interview caddies and demand S2 Cognition scores? Like, you need a good decision maker on the bag, right?
100%. I mean, it's just you either got it or you don't. You know, like it's only so much time. You know, you're on the clock. It's golf's trying to address their pace of play problem, just like baseball is. I just saw a headline about that today. I need a dynamic caddy who's hardwired, to process information quickly. And it's like pitch recognition, sometimes you either got it or you don't. And that's why we need our friends at S2 to help you out with that.
I could see you just verbally undressing your caddy mid-round, Fitzy, and I'm here for it. Like, it's competitive and we got to be adults. And if you can't take getting yelled at, then I'm sorry. I'm actually not sorry.
That's right. I mean, and you guys, you have to absorb my wrath often. I know, because this is a competitive business. But you know what? You guys you handle it well. Yeah, I'm proud of you guys.
Got to be adults. Now, Fitzy, you may need your thick skin for the next topic, the inane banter part of the podcast. So I was told, I was on the phone with a gentleman today that grew up in the great state of Massachusetts. And this gentleman told me, and I'm paraphrasing, if you're west of the 95, if you're west of I-95, that's fake Massachusetts.
First of all, the 95. Roots.
I know. I've been on the West Coast too long.
For Pete's sake.
Who calls it the? Is that
that's
California, right?
Which I love. Don't get me wrong. I find that so fun to say. I do it all the time. Just to be funny.
The 10, the 405, the 601. It's great.
But no, it's just. Well, first of all, in Massachusetts we call it 128. Even though it's also I-95, that what they're talking about is the 128 belt line. It's 128 and 95. It's both those things. If you live outside 128, then you don't exist to the people inside 128. I mean, that is true. We've us Central Massachusetts people, we've been ignored too long. I think it's time to rise up.
Rise up, Central Mass.
And Worcester County is going to make itself heard.
Oh gosh.
Joe,
do you have is there a natural rivalry with like Fitchburg, Mass?
That's so I was born in Leominster, same town Jonathan Santucci was born, Duke Ace, Johnny Appleseed, and Aaron Fitt, the big three. And and Leominster's arch rival is Fitchburg. Yes, that's no love lost between the Red Raiders and the Blue Devils, let me tell you.
Oh, wow. Fitzy, can you repeat the big three again? I want to make sure I document this.
Jonathan Santucci, Johnny Appleseed, and of course, Aaron Fitt.
Yeah, that's right. So here's the question. The question is, I want you guys to pick a town near where you grew up that is like, when you reference that town, that's like authentic. So let me give you an example. I'm from Delaware County, Pennsylvania, suburbs, the streets of the suburbs of Philly. And I take a lot of pride in being from Delco. It's kind of like your, blue collar, lunch pail, the people that just come out of the city, blue collars is the description, right? That said, Delaware County has a lot of towns in it. And the town I grew up in, Newtown Square, is by far the softest part of Delaware County. Like,
checks out.
Yeah, we are very white collar. God bless my parents. They worked hard. They did well, right? And so I was embarrassed by it as a kid, but they did great. Good for them, right? So when I reference Delco, which I reference all the time, I'm fraudulent. Like that's so. If I were to say I'm from Delco, somebody in the know, if they wanted to sniff me out, they'd say where. I'd say Newtown Square, and they'd snicker at me. If I said something like Clifton Heights or Prospect Park or Sharon Hill, they'd be like, oh, okay, I better not piss this guy off. So that's my question. Fitzy, you go first. Give me a town in Central Mass where you drop that town name. It's like, okay, this dude's authentic. This is legit Central Mass.
Yeah. Listen, that's
Fitchburg?
Screw Fitchburg. No, that's a bunch of posers. Those people
like Newtown Square.
Not on Fitchburg. I mean, look, you got to watch out for the South Ash crew over there, South Ashburnham, as our neighboring town. I grew up in Westminster. South Ashburnham is where the high school was. And listen, those are mean streets of South Ash. And so I'm gonna that's an obscure one for you, but that's what I'm gonna go with.
I like that very much. Joseph, what say you?
Well, if as far as Houston suburbs go, because I grew up in a north side of Houston suburb. Shout out to Spring, Texas, which is like an overused. You see
everyone's
players
from Spring, Texas
in college baseball from Spring, Texas, but seriously. Spring is like kind of an overused name. Like there are a lot of people that are technically from Spring, but if you're actually from that area, a person whose address says Spring might say, well, I live in Klein. Or some people say I live in the Woodlands, which, by the way, Woodlands is the Newtown Square of like the northern Houston suburbs.
Now I'm insulted. Newtown Square way rougher than the Woodlands, but we'll cover that. That's for another podcast.
But there's a couple of places. One, if to know you're really from that general area of the Houston suburbs, there's a town there's a suburb northeast of Houston called Humble, Texas. It's where Rob Vaughn is from, by the way. Shout out Rob Vaughn.
Like humble with an H, like
the word. So the word humble, and that's my point, is that people who don't know would say humble, but it's pronounced humble. So that's certainly one. There's also a town kind of further north of the Woodlands, kind of over by a town called Conroe, called Cut and Shoot, Texas.
Okay.
And there's
that's authentic.
There's really not a whole lot going on in Cut and Shoot, Texas. So you got to
cut and shoot, for God's sakes. Cut and shoot.
It's just as it is. It's CUT space AND space SHOOT.
Oh my gosh!
Cut and Shoot,
in
Texas.
the world. That is
Cut and Shoot, Texas.
Oh my gosh!
That's an answer. Wow. I mean, the show's over. I'll see you guys next week.
I have no follow-up questions, Joseph. I'm not prepared for follow-up questions. I will be Googling Cut and Shoot Texas all week. I need to learn more about it. That is awesome. One of the genesis of this conversation, besides that unnamed person from Massachusetts, Fitzy, saying that everyone west of the 95, there I go, the 95 again. Boy, I'm really a West Coaster now.
Yeah.
Is fake mass. Is when we ranked Northeastern in the chat, someone who can identify themselves or choose not to wrote Brookline stand up. And that I almost tripped over my computer laughing so hard. That was well
good.
Played.
That was good.
Yeah. Brookline stand up. So anyway, that was
you
fun.
Don't just waltz into Friedman Diamond. That's all I'm saying.
No, you certainly not this year. You don't.
Yeah.
Come on now. Go Huskies. South Ashburnham. Very good.
I believe I'm going to see the Huskies this weekend, by the way, down in Wilmington. The number 25 ranked Northeastern Huskies coming down to take on UNCW in a CAA clash, which is pretty exciting. I'll be honest with you. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, heck yeah. Hey, I think Northeastern, like when they were in that 2021 Fayetteville regional, I didn't feel like they were just like a 2-and-Q show up and get the barbecue type of thing. Like they were legit. Like I thought they could legitimately do damage. Now I didn't realize that NJIT was going to play so well, and then Nebraska played out of their minds. And but yeah, like this is not a flash in the pan. I know we've said that. It's redundant on this podcast, but Northeastern's a legit good college baseball program.
Yeah, I feel for them a little bit, just because it feels like they've never, from a postseason standpoint, never gotten their just due, because they made it in what year was it? They were controversially made it 18.
think it was 18 when they went to NC State.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of, ire about them getting in, and whether you agree or not, that just was the reality of the situation. And then in 21, you allude to, Runes, I stumped like crazy for that team when I was doing I pretty regularly do a podcast with our friend Matt Jones from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. He has me on periodically, and I stumped pretty hard for them, saying, hey, they've got the top of their roster is SEC level players. And then they just kind of went out and were just kind of, that weekend. And so I say all that to say, like, it does feel like we're still kind of waiting for them to, I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to say fatigue because it's not that big of a deal, but I think there is a little bit of a kind of waiting for them to make their national moment, because I think there's an association with them in the postseason of either being fraudulent or having not deserved it. And so I think those of us in the know understand that this team is for real and this program is for real. We're just kind of waiting for them to show the nation, if you will.
That's the next step in their progression is now you're in a regional, win a game, win a couple games, get to a regional final. And UNC Wilmington's a program that's been making regionals for 2 decades now and still hasn't won one, but they've been in a bunch of, I feel like they've been in some regional finals.
Yeah, like 9 of them. I mean, in the 2000s, they've been in I want to say 9, maybe it's 7, but it's a big number.
The 2016 Columbia regional is the one that stands out to me that was there for the taking. They just
that's one that I was thinking of too. That where they were 2-0, they were in the catbird seat, and I feel like that's not the only time they've been in a regional final, but I could be wrong about that. But that's that's the next step is win a couple games, get to a regional final, and then the next step is to win a damn thing, And it's like Northeastern, maybe you can skip a step and just win one, but you got to do something, once you get in. I mean, there's certainly that's Joe's right.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Hey boys, let's fast forward to the great Kendall J. Rogers jumps in here. Can we do what, Fitzy?
Kendall, you already missed the section of the show where we talked about Spring, Texas.
So,
hey, Rod,
Kendall, you ever been to Cut and Shoot?
Cut and Shoot, Texas?
I don't think Kendall can hear us.
Kendall may not be able to hear us.
Kendall's got the perplexed look on his face right now.
That's right.
Mouth agape.
When we all agreed to have Kendall just drop in the middle of the podcast, we forgot that there's 3 minutes of every podcast where Kendall's trying to figure out his equipment.
Yeah, of course. We did forget that.
So
can you hear us and can we hear you, Kendall?
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
So I'm just I'm following a very interesting story right now. So I got home from this party and I get a link sent to me. So get this, guys, not to drop a bomb on you, but the state of Ohio has halted betting on all Alabama college baseball games because of suspicious wagering activity detected by the Crimson Tide against LSU on Friday.
What?
And from what I understand, I was just talking to a couple of people who do a lot of gambling, and they said this would not happen unless they had legitimate proof that there's some sketchy stuff going on.
I don't understand.
So ESPN.com is reporting that in the state of Ohio, they have halted any betting on Alabama baseball games.
Well, now we've really made it as a sport.
I know.
Time.
I mean, this is fascinating.
There are obviously more important threads to follow here, like maybe some stuff with some real implications. But I would really like to dig in on Kendall's sources as a couple of people who do a lot of gambling. I'd like
Kendall,
to
did you talk to my
not
dad's
name
barber?
names.
Is that who you just talked to?
Yeah, I will not name any names.
I'm not saying you need to name them. I'm just curious,
oh my
just
gosh.
a couple people who go to Lake Charles a couple times a year.
Oh my gosh.
But it's shocking. So yeah, it is a ESPN.com story that the state of Ohio betting commission has banned the betting of University of Alabama baseball games throughout the entire state.
Isn't baseball gambling it's odds betting, right? So
baseball you can only bet the money line. So I'm learning things on the fly here. So in the state of Ohio, you can only bet on money lines in college baseball. But I kind of quickly went through the box score of that game, and there's nothing in there that's weird. Alabama, got up big on LSU got up big on Alabama. Alabama came back, made it interesting. And LSU still won.
Yeah, no offense to Alabama, but it was a very ordinary result, right? LSU sweeping Alabama at home was a high percentage outcome.
Yes,
I would think.
And LSU was a heavy favorite, and they won a money line game. So Like I'm just trying to figure out, looking at the box score, like how there's anything remotely sketchy going on here.
Well, it says that there's the wagering activity was suspicious. So, I mean, I don't know what that means. I mean, was it just, I have no idea.
There's somebody involved in the game that was either a mom or, I mean, it could be a mom or a dad wagered. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but that's really interesting.
Without speculating specifically, I'm most familiar with this type of situation in tennis. Tennis is a sport that's fraught with this kind of activity because the first thing is because it's an international sport. So you have people in, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa, like basically all around the globe who follow tennis to some degree and kind of understand it and bet on it. And then tennis's minor leagues, they call it the Challenger Circuit or the Futures Tour, make so little money that they are often approached by gamblers to tamper with results, throw games, throw matches, all that kind of stuff. And again, very clear, I'm not saying any of this happened, but that language is what gets used in these situations. They call it suspicious betting activity. So that's where I'm familiar. That's the only reason I draw that link. Obviously, we have, in this particular case, we have very little information. Kendall is literally reporting it to all of us, as you could probably tell by us.
Yeah, it was an ESPN.com story. But anyways, we can talk about it more later. But it's just like, I don't think I've ever seen that before. So
that story on the front page of ESPN.com, right below a story, another college baseball story. Apparently, I just saw this one. Texas A&M Texarkana baseball player was struck by a stray bullet during a game. I mean, good Lord, what's going on over there? It's crazy.
Hey, boys, let me so while we're on the serious stuff, let me transition to, we're taping on Monday, and obviously, Kendall, you reported today that Mississippi State moved on from. Yeah. Oh, or you didn't report it, or
no? The program reported. I just tweeted the news out.
Okay, you tweeted it. Still. Yep. So you tweeted that Mississippi State moved on from Scott Foxhall, their pitching coach, and hey, as our sport grows up, this type of stuff we were talking about on our thread. Can we ever remember a mid-season change like this that is, directly linked to, hey, this position group's not doing well enough, so we're moving on from that position group coach? That feels new for college baseball. I just want to say this. I tweeted on top of Kendall's tweet because I think so highly of Scott Foxhall. I think he's awesome. And I don't want these sentiments to come off as critical of Chris Lemonis, because this is the job. Like, if you're Chris Lemonis, these are the tough decisions. I'm sure Chris Lemonis has not slept when he made this decision, assuming he made it last night. I bet you he didn't sleep a wink last night. Like, that is awful. Like, he won a national title with Scott Foxhall. And, but here's the thing in our sport, the job, college coaching, your job is to win games. But what's weird is the reward is the relationships you take with you. And the reason I bring that up is because I tweeted on top of Kendall's tweet, just my affection for Scott Foxhall. And one of the people that liked my tweet, there's a lot of people that are, coaches that like my tweet. Landon Sims was one of the people that liked our tweet. And so it's like Scott Foxhall leaves here with a national title ring, but the relationship with a future big leaguer like Landon Sims, like, that's the real prize. And I'll tell you guys this quick story on Scott Foxhall. I went from Arizona State as an assistant coach to being a head coach at Phoenix College, which was the most downtrodden junior college program in Arizona at the time. And, it's quite the ego kick, right? Like, at Arizona State, you're thought of as a big deal. You're treated that way, at least. And now I'm the 14th ranked junior college head coach in the state of Arizona. And Scott Foxhall came in for a recruiting trip, and I had no players. He was at College of Charleston with John Pulowski at the time. We had 0 players to offer them at the time, no fits at all. And I didn't know Scott Foxhall at all. He reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I'd like to take you to lunch. I want to hear some Murph stories," which was a great way to break the ice. And, we have lunch, and he's the best. That was probably 2006, known him ever since. You guys know him. I mean, he's the best, right? Great coach, better person, etc. And so it's heartbreaking to see this. It's traumatic for your family. It's, it causes you to doubt yourself as a coach, all those types of things. But, I just think that we all know Scott Foxhall is a great coach. The guy's got a national championship ring. And the relationships he's built are what are really going to last. And it's just tough. I get it, but it was a tough thing to read today.
Yeah. And I echo everything you said. Think the world of Scott Foxhall. Saw him early this year, and you could already tell it was wearing on him, man. And they, hey, we all get it. This team won a national title 2 years ago. It's not very long ago, but they've not been good since then. And it's one of the largest, most passionate fan bases in the country. And frankly, a pound of flesh was going to happen. And I think it sucks that they couldn't wait until after, at the very least, we couldn't wait till at the end of the season to get their pound of flesh. But whatever. I mean, it's, like you said, it's the SEC. It's the most competitive league in the country. Fans, you got to think this was driven by external pressure. I mean, I hate it. I hate it for all these guys. We like the whole coaching staff, obviously we all do. And Lem's in a tough position too, but it's, I don't know. It just stinks, guys. I'm just rambling. It stinks.
It does stink, but I will say this. I mean, when you look at the decision as a whole, and I agree with you. I think at this point, if you're Mississippi State, you've got 6 conference wins. Let's face it, it's not like they're going to wake up tomorrow and rattle off a bunch of wins and make the NCAA tournament. I think I'd be ultra surprised that happened. So I would have waited till the end of the year. But I mean, the facts are that Mississippi State 2 years ago was 187th in the country, or last year was 187th in the country in ERA, and they're 206 in the country in ERA this year. I mean, at the end of the day, that's pretty bad for a program that won a national championship, that has the best facility in college baseball. That's brutally bad. So I love Scott Foxhall as well, but at the end of the day, guys, this is a results-oriented business, and those are pretty poor results.
Yep.
2 things can be true. To echo so much of what you guys have said, 2 things can be true. The results have not been good on the pitching staff. Perhaps it was time for both parties to move on from that. It's also true that he's incredibly respected, has a long track record of success. If Scott Foxhall wants to be a pitching coach again, he's going to have a line of potential suitors who are interested in bringing him on. So, unless he decides to move on, this is not the end of Scott Foxhall being a high-level pitching coach.
Well, the crazy thing about college baseball in general too, guys, is I can look at Scott Foxhall this way as well. I mean, you think back to 2 years ago, they had Landon Sims, who got hurt, was it week 2 against Tulane. He was out for the year, preseason All-American.
Yes.
Who was the Sunday starter that got hurt that year too? It wasn't Stinnett. It was
well, Stinnett was. I mean, it's.
Oh, that was the kid from Furman, Stone
Simmons.
Yeah, Stone Simmons. He got hurt. What a few weeks later?
They had a ton of injuries.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of feel like last year, to give Scott some credit there, you kind of feel like last year certainly would have gone a little differently. And let's not forget how quickly Mississippi State's fortunes could have changed this offseason. They were in the mix with Tennessee and LSU for Paul Skeens. If Paul Skeens goes to MSU this year, and Cade Smith or whomever is your Saturday guy, and not the guy you're expecting to be Friday, the Friday pitcher, or you're not expecting, a freshman to be your Friday guy, the complexion of the staff is totally different. Yep. So that's how razor thin the margins can be sometimes.
And here's the thing too, Mississippi State, I don't want to say this in a pejorative way, but this is a program that has had volatile results. I think we just assume it's a historic brand that's good every single year and all that stuff. And, because Skip Bertman and Ron Polk are the godfathers of the SEC. But here's the truth. In 2010, which is not a million years ago, they were 11th out of 12 in the SEC. In 2015, they were 14th in the SEC. That's 14 out of 14. Last year, they were 14th out of 14 in the SEC. So and you can build an awesome stadium, but guess what? In the SEC, that doesn't really separate you from anybody. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got an awesome stadium, right? Like you got more seats. Awesome. I mean, it is. It's as John Cohen has said a million times, it's the Carnegie Hall of college baseball. It really is awesome, but they're all awesome down there. So I think that's, and now for Mississippi State, you always hear those rumors that, oh, maybe they're going to move on for Chris Lemonis. At some point, like now you're going to go from 2016 to now, John Cohen, Andy Cannizaro, Gary Henderson, Chris Lemonis, and coach number 5. Like at some point, you got to just pick a captain and dig in, right? Like, and volatility's in your past. Chris Lemonis didn't show up, and then Mississippi State became volatile. That predated him, my opinion.
What this kind of tells me, and this is reading tea leaves. This is not based off of anything I've been told like firsthand, but typically when a coach, I've been following coaching changes long enough to go, when a coach is forced, and this is especially the case in football and basketball, but when a coach is forced to get rid of an assistant in the middle of the season like that, 9 out of 10 times is a situation where the athletic department tells the coach like, hey, either you make a change or we're going to the top on this thing. And you just kind of wonder if this kind of gives you an idea. Like we've heard rumblings out of Starkville that like, you know what, they might make it just a wholesale change throughout the whole program. And this might be an indication that they were actually kind of serious about that. Like that wasn't just hubbub. Like they were serious about potentially making a change at the top. So again,
as you know, Kendall, this is what always makes me nervous in modern college athletics. Yeah. This is not the AD that hired Chris Lemonis. That always makes me a little anxious, right? Like it's that John Cohen is who hired Chris Lemonis. John Cohen's the AD at Auburn now. So, that always provides anxiety.
Well, and you're in a program like Mississippi State. And again, this is just looking at other AD change and other coaching changes. But if you're Zach Selman, you came over from Oklahoma, you haven't made your big impact hire yet. You're in a program where, you know what, if you're making a new baseball hire, that's a huge deal to that school. And so you make a big splash. So could be a little bit viewing it that way as well. But I will say this. I 100% believe they should stick with Chris Lemonis. I don't believe in this idea that someone just forgets 1 year how to coach. I mean, let's talk about Jake Gautreaux, for instance. He's a guy that was our assistant coach of the year 2 years ago, ultra talented coach, could have had the Tulane head coaching job, chose to stay at Mississippi State. Do we think all of a sudden that Jake Gautreaux just doesn't know how to evaluate players and bring in the right players? No, like he's still a really good coach. So sometimes sometimes there's some bad luck. And I think there's a little bit of that involved when you look at these guys from an injury standpoint.
Yep. Let's do and I want to wrap it with this. What you said a second ago, Joe, is spot on. Scott Foxhall, if he wants to keep coaching college baseball, my guess is he does. He'll have a job in a month, right? Like it's the guy is too good and way too respected. He will not sit on the sidelines unless he chooses to. Let's do something fun in the SEC. Okay. Dylan Cruz is fun in the SEC. His on-base percentage, whether you look at overall or in conference, they're within 5 points of each other. His on-base percentage is 639. I think it might be 633 in conference. That's a joke, right? Like that is ridiculous. He's on base 2 out of every 3 plate appearances. He's scored 71 runs so far. 71 runs. He's got a chance to score 100 runs in a college season. So let's focus on the on-base percentage for a second, boys. Do you know who led the SEC in on-base percentage in 2022? Please don't cheat.
Sonny D.
Yes, that's correct. Take a guess at the number, Joseph.
Okay, so Cruz right now, we were saying
he's in the 630s.
Okay, I'll say 520.
Fitzy?
498.
Kendall, what say you?
For Sonny D, it was like 530 something.
That's it, 539.
Yeah.
So there were 2 players in conference last year that had an OBP over 500. Care to guess who the second guy was?
I know this is a really good trivia question, but did you know that Ryan Targach led the SEC in RBIs last year?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Is that the OBP guy too?
Nope.
Is it Targach?
But right church, wrong pew. You're very close.
Oh, Dylan Rock.
Dylan Rock, 503 in conference play. So think about that. There were 2 players last year in the SEC that scraped over 500, and Sonny D 549. That's better than scraping, but. And Dylan Cruz is at 639, 633. That's insanity. And okay, so here's my final part of the trivia question. Who led? Give me the top 2 players for runs scored in the SEC overall. Top 2 run scoring players last year in the SEC overall stats, and what were their final numbers? Both famous.
Bradfield.
Not Bradfield. It's a little bit of a trick question. But famous. Think famous. I'll give you a hint. They're both still in the league.
What was
so was it Cruz? Was Cruz one of the 2 last
Cruz year? Won the league run scoring title last year.
Langford,
that's it. And I'll give you guys the number. Cruz scored 73 runs last year, 73. He's at 71 today. And Wyatt Langford scored 71 last year. I when I found these stats, I was like, gosh dang, like we all know Dylan Cruz is doing something just totally bonkers, but the name of the game is to score runs, and it is totally bonkers.
Can I tell you something that's also crazy? Wyatt Langford is hitting 397 right now. And it feels like he's an afterthought because of how good Cruz and Ethan Petry have been.
He's not even in the discussion. It's wild.
I mean,
it's crazy. 397, 1028.
Mark and I have had this conversation a lot about guys like Charlie Condon at Georgia, who's having like a bonkers season. And it's just like, And I'd compare it to, so there's a headline for readers of The Onion. Will maybe remember this one, that there's a headline on The Onion one time that says like, holy shit, man walks on moon. Just because it's like we take that as like a granted, but it's like in hindsight, it's like that would be crazy if you told someone in 1910 that somebody was going to walk on the moon, right?
Yeah.
But I feel that way about Dylan Cruz. I had, for an episode of Highway to Hoover coming out later this week, I had on Leah Van from The Advocate, and I asked her seriously today, like, are you just tempted to make the headline of every one of your stories? Like, wow, isn't Dylan Cruz great? Yes, but for real, he's actually having one of the best seasons in college baseball history. And she was just kind of like, yeah, honestly, like you have to get creative, not to just
like how many times can you write about Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens?
Guys, we're 11 weeks into the season and he's hitting 490.
Yeah.
I mean,
and by the way, like the pitching he's about to see, he's got a chance to tear that pitching up. I mean, no offense, but he's going to face Auburn, Mississippi State, and Georgia. Like none of those teams are throwing the ball great.
Well, and I will say this too, like in conference play, Ethan Petry had a little bit of an edge on him until this past weekend. And, a couple of games I saw over the weekend, Petry actually looked a little bit human. So I think he struck out 3 times. Joe, didn't he strike out 3 times in the finale, or was that the Saturday game?
I mean, it wasn't a great weekend. Like I did not have a lot of moments where I thought like, wow, Ethan Petry's really having a weekend. Like I just think it was a tough weekend for him generally. Yeah.
Very good. Hey, before we leave the SEC, I want to make a statement, then I'm going to ask you guys a question. So like I had this visual, I was on a plane this week, and I had this visual, I think about some of these SEC fan bases like Georgia, Alabama, A&M, Auburn. Like the landing of the plane this regular season is not going to be pleasant for those fan bases, I don't think. Like it's just going to be, we have turbulence, then we don't have turbulence, then we find a good pocket air, then we're not in a good pocket air. It just feels like you're going to need a seatbelt. That is what it is. Here's the question I want to ask you guys. Tennessee is 1-9 on the road. And my concern with Tennessee is that their offense, even though it's starting to come into its own, it's only coming into its own at home. And is this an offense that will travel? Now, that said, they do seem healthier. They seem way more confident. Chase Burns, the bullpen, is an absolute season changer, all that. But Tennessee, best case scenario, they're going to host a regional. There's certainly, I don't see a path to top 8 for them. Like they would take something superhuman. So, is there road? Go ahead, Kendall.
I was going to say, I wrote about this in the postseason buzz today. So basically, they would need to win their final 3 series, assuming they win 2 out of 3, right? That would get them to 17 conference wins. A&M last year, I think, won 18 regular season conference games. And it was a top 8 national seed with an RPI in the 20s. I think if they were able to get to 17 and they won a game or 2 in Hoover, they could very well be a top 8.
They would certainly be in the discussion. I wonder, I wonder how much of A&M last year too was they won the West.
Yeah.
It was a really congested West,
well.
And Tennessee's most likely not going to win the East because they've got South Carolina, Florida, and Vanderbilt in front of them. So I agree with your general sentiment, though. Like I do think there is a path where that you have to start to consider them, and if you're a potential host, non-SEC host, especially on the East Coast, so if you're Wake or Coastal, those types of teams, like you're really hoping Tennessee gets in as a host. Like that is, you don't want them as a 2. Like you want no part of them as a 2. So there's a lot of team, as much as they've played the villain role, there are a lot of teams, good teams in the ACC and what have you out here that are really rooting for that team to win a bunch of games.
Yeah. And I would say this too, like they're going to have a full head of steam. Let's just say they finish strong, right? And they know that if they make a big run in Hoover, they can be a top 8. They're going to have a full head of steam, whereas like a team like South Carolina or Vanderbilt or LSU, like they're going to pretty much know they're already a top 8. And so like if you're those teams, like how hard are you going to try to win the SEC tournament? Whereas like Tennessee is going to bring Chase Burns out a couple of times out of the bullpen. They're going to, they're going to try to extend Drew Beam and Chase Dolander in a ballpark that historically is pitching friendly.
And I think there's something to that point, if I may digress a little more here. The fact that the number 1 national seed has not won it all since 1999, but you do have these teams like Ole Miss last year and Virginia in 2015 and Oregon State in 2007 that are like the last team in the field. And Virginia was not the last team in the field in 2015, but they were 3 seed, right?
Yeah.
That I do think that there's a difference between having to ramp yourself up almost artificially. Because you just cruised through the whole season and now it's like, all right, now it's go time. Like, here we go. And like, I feel like sometimes for some of those like dominant regular season teams, it can be more of a grind. It could be weighing on you more. Like we have to get to Omaha or this season's a disappointment. Like that's something that concerns me about Wake Forest this year is like, they're in a position now where it's like, well, cripes, if we don't get to Omaha with this team, then what? Like this is our shot. Like it's got to be now, and it's like that worries me because it absolutely it's got to be now. This is their team, and like if you're again the proverbial house money team, I think that's super powerful. And actually I wrote about this. I did write about this a little bit today with Stanford. I kind of like the fact that Stanford, they were preseason number 3 or whatever. We thought they'd kind of steamroll their way through. And it has been more of a grind for them, and it's like, I kind of like the fact that they're getting pushed every week. Like they've been whatever 3 or 4 weeks in a row. They've been down 4 runs on a Sunday and come back to win. The fact that, all weekend it was a dogfight with UCLA, and then they had to overcome some bullpen things and like this and that. But like, it's almost like this team is like, they've stayed in fight mode, and there's no cruising. And they're still going to have something to play for right till the very end of the season. I kind of prefer that setup.
It's like I feel that way about LSU, Fitzy. I share your concern with Wake that Wake has kind of overwhelmed everybody because they're so dang good. LSU, maybe it's injury driven or who knows, but LSU just feels like week after week we see them in these 15-round heavyweight fights. And I think that will serve them well. Now, again, LSU's pitching injuries, that's a real thing, right? Like we always say you only need 6 or 7 arms for the postseason, but that's even getting tricky for LSU. They've had so much adversity on the mound, but I think LSU is going to enter the postseason the most tested team in the country because they're wearing that bullseye. It almost reminds me of Virginia 2014, where everyone's just coming to get you every stinking weekend. And Virginia almost pulled it off. They almost went wire to wire until game 3 of the finals. And then Johnny Norwood clips them. It's just crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah. The only thing that concerns you at LSU is this, when you play that many intense games and that many just, nail biters, you just kind of wonder, like at the end of the year, like, do you just kind of run out of gas a little bit?
They've been pushed.
And even Virginia in 2014, as great a season as they had, I don't think it was quite wire to wire. Like I feel like there was some point during the season they lost a series, like or 2 even. Like LSU has not lost a weekend, neither has Wake Forest. Like they've so far through 11 weeks, we're not all the way there yet, but like it's legitimate wire to wire. And LSU, since the preseason, they've been number 1 in I think every ranking, certainly ours. And so like this would be a historic wire to wire situation if they can pull it off. And again, it won't be easy for all the reasons you've talked about.
No. Hey, let's go to the ACC, boys. Before we do that, let's say thanks to our friends at Blast Baseball, another one of our partnerships. If you're ready to dominate at the plate, Blast Baseball is trusted by more MLB and college teams than any other hitting solution. The Blast sensor attaches to the knob of any bat, provides real-time feedback with every swing. Just go to blastmotion.com, enter the code D1Baseball at checkout to save $10. Thanks to our good friends at Blast Motion. As we go to the SEC, by the way, I'll just put a bow on the SEC by saying that as we sit here tonight, Dylan Cruz, the heavy favorite to win the Kurt Reed Award in 2023. I mean, I think that's obvious, the D1 Baseball Player of the Year. Okay, so the ACC had some interesting results. We had a lot of road series wins of significance. Clemson at Boston College, North Carolina at Virginia Tech, Duke at Louisville, Miami at Louisville. Duke won the series at where?
Virginia,
that's right.
Yeah, that was this weekend.
Sorry. Yes, blurry.
Kind of a big series, guys.
It's been a long weekend, guys.
All big series. So here's the question of give me, Joe, I'm going to start with you. One thing in the ACC last week, and the thing that impressed you the most, like there was a lot of results that get your attention. What's the one that really made you stand up, figuratively?
I think, well, first of all, you don't know whether I might have.
That's right.
I might have literally stood up. Got
Brookline
so
stand up.
That's right. Brookline stand up. Shout out Friedman Diamond.
Second of the show.
I think Duke taking care of Virginia, and not just because I picked it in our and was reminded of that by the Duke Baseball Twitter account, because I'd kind of forgotten that I was the only guy who picked Duke.
Wow.
But who's counting, honestly? Just
Somebody's counting.
Little game among friends, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
But just, I mean, Duke just kind of continues to roll on, and they've dealt with some injuries, and they've continued to win ball games. And now that they have some series wins, especially the one against Clemson on the road, that are looking better and better by the day. But they took care of Boston College, and we kind of thought maybe that was the end of Boston College as a thing. But BC has continued to play well, so now that just looks like a really good series win. And then they go to Charlottesville against a Virginia team that I think on paper, certainly on the position player side, but on paper, I think, I don't want to speak for all of us, but we just think is more talented. And Duke took care of business and wins 2 out of 3 there. And so this has gone from a team that I thought a few weeks ago was, this is probably a nice regional team, to where now, I mean, I know you guys haven't done Kindle and Aaron the Nerdcast yet, but I mean, that's a team that is looking at hosting,
sure.
Which would be interesting, by the way, just as a side note, because would they be able to host at Coombs?
So the Bulls are in town that weekend. So this is actually, I meant to
get out, Bulls.
I meant to text Chris Pollard to see what their plan is. But I will do that before the Nerdcast tomorrow, because it's a great question. I mean, Coombs, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, that's my
okay. So I'm going to show my lack of Durham knowledge. I'm assuming the old Bulls ballpark is gone.
No, it's still there, but
I don't think you can. I mean, well, with NC Central moved out, I don't know if they've kept up the ballpark well enough.
Gotcha.
I
mean, if they started now, maybe they could do it, but I don't think. I mean, you might need to like resod the grass. Like,
how much does it hold?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I think it's big enough. I think it's big enough.
If that was a viable option, and we don't know that it is, you could host there.
Well, I mean, let's not forget that East Carolina hosted in Kinston one year.
Yeah, there are other options too, like other minor, the Mudcats, or I mean, maybe even Greensboro is only an hour away. I don't know. Like, there's other options. Yeah. I mean, heck, UCSB hosted 4 hours away, 7 hours away.
Lake Elsinore, baby.
That 1 year. So
I mean, I would be 100% here. I mean, obviously, I would not be covering it. I'll be at some SEC regional, but like I would be 100% here for a Duke regional hosted at the old Durham Athletic Park. That'd be awesome. I mean, there are some cool features, and I actually liked covering NC Central games there, because there's a bar behind it called Boxcar.
Yeah,
that's like a arcade bar that has like an outdoor patio section that looks into the stadium, and there's like a patio behind right field. There's like an event space like that overhangs right field. Like, you could actually create like a legit atmosphere there.
It's a neat part of town.
It is, but it's just a matter of if they could do it. I don't know.
I feel like we need Duke hosting a regional at the old Durham Bulls Park with Tennessee as a 2 seed.
Oh,
I feel like that would just be too great.
Somebody get Jim Kerner on the horn and see if he can pull some strings to get the old DAP up and ready to go.
That would be wild.
Runes, can I go with Miami, by the way, from an ACC team?
Yeah.
I thought it was impressive that, they win the first game of the series. Louisville takes it to them, wins 11-0 in the second game, and then they come back and beat Louisville with the offense and, that 10-7 win. And, they've all of a sudden now won 3 straight series. I mean, you look at that league as a whole, you've got Miami's won 3 straight, Clemson's won 4 straight, and all of a sudden the hosting race in that league has gotten fascinating when you look at Clemson and you look at Miami.
Yeah,
with those 2 teams rolling right now.
I like Miami's one of those teams that's been tested. We've talked about their road schedule. It just turned out to be, they've had to play at Florida, at Wake, at Virginia when Virginia was playing good, at Louisville, at North Carolina. I mean, that's a lot, for a team that's notoriously not good on the road, but they've stood up. Hey, Fitzy, can I take you off the ACC? I want to hear about Stanford and UCLA. Yeah. What is so you kind of gave us your Stanford, like you feel like you're more in on Stanford having seen them in person than you were before when you showed up.
Yeah, and part of the reason for that, I think a major reason for that is because I think the bullpen is finally getting on track now. I mean, like over the last 2 weeks or so, there's actually been a little bit of an extended stretch now where both Drew Dowd and Ryan Bruno have been awesome. And they weren't for the first.
And Drew Dowd's in the bullpen period, right?
Yeah. He and Bruno are kind of the 1-2 punch back there. They've got Joey Dixon in the starting role, which I think works. I like Dixon. He showed me some good stuff. I wonder if they're going to wind up having to lean on him even more because there is a concern about Matt Scott hitting that freshman wall. He's been their Saturday starter a couple weeks in a row. He's not been sharp, not throwing strikes. Velocity's a little bit down. That's an issue for Stanford, no question. But on the flip side, I mean, I feel actually pretty good about the bullpen. I mean, I wrote about it today. You can check it out in my piece. But Bruno and Dowd have real stuff, and right now they're confident and they're attacking, and they look good this weekend to me. And so that to me is a little bit of a difference maker. Their offense is really good, and defensively they weren't actually great this weekend, but they're fine. I mean, defensive personnel is fine. It's an SEC kind of position player group, very physical team as it has been the last few years. And yes, I think like they've just kind of quietly, they're sitting in first place in the pack, but they've been in the rankings all year long, but it feels like they've just kind of flown under the radar a little, because it's been a little more of a struggle than it has for some other elite teams in the country. But at the end of the day, I think they're an elite team. I mean, I'm absolutely betting on this team to be in Omaha again this year.
And does UCLA have a postseason run in them, or are they kind of, just because of some of the injuries they've sustained, they're probably a maker regional, and it would take something really, they'd have to just get crazy hot to win a regional?
Yeah, I mean, they played hard this weekend, and they're in position to win the series. I mean, they're up in the 8th inning of the rubber game, and they couldn't finish it. And part of the reason for that is, they're throwing Cody Del Vecchio, who's their guy in the bullpen, for a 3rd straight game. And he looked pretty gassed to me, and stuff was down, and he's leaving balls up, and he's, left a center cut fastball, and Alberto Reyes hit it for a grand slam. And I was like, as soon as that matchup happened, I was like, uh-oh, like this is, I actually thought to myself, and I leaned over to the scout next to me. I said, you gotta go yard here, man. Like, because Rios was swinging the bat great all weekend, and you could tell that Del Vecchio was just spent, and that to me is a reflection of maybe just the kind of lack of depth right now, the lack of guys maybe that they really trust in those high leverage situations. I mean, Savage has always been very structured with his bullpens. You think back to the way, like, all right, like Zach Weiss, he's our 8th inning guy. David Burke's our 9th inning guy. And I forget who the 7th inning guy would be. Like, there's always like that kind of regimented structure, and he will use guys a lot. But that to me right now, I mean, I feel so much better about this team if you could just stick Kelly Austin in the bullpen, because, which what their plan was. They wanted to go, Alonzo Treadwell on Saturday and Flanagan on Sunday. They finally had all 3 of those guys healthy, and it lasted 1 week. And then Treadwell went down with a back injury. And, Flanagan is getting ramped up now. I like him a lot. He's very talented left-hander with 4 pitches, but now you've got to ride Kelly Austin back in the rotation, at least until however long it takes Treadwell to come back, if he does come back this year. So it's just like one thing after another, and they're juggling people around the infield, and it's just like
can't get your break.
It just feels like right now they're holding on for dear life. And this was just a huge dagger of an opportunity for them, that they had it, like they had this series. It was their road series win to get them back on track. And then to get it ripped away, boy, it felt like a backbreaker to me.
Yep. That league's going to be fascinating because there are 7 teams within 4 games of first place. Like both Oregon schools really have my attention right now. Both Oregon State and Oregon have won 5 Pac-12 series. Now Oregon's 5-2 in Pac-12 series. Oregon State's 5-3. It's just amazing. Like I like what Mitch Canham's done with the Oregon State lineup, where he's got Travis Bazana, who's played great this year, by the way, he's really broken out, and he's got Garrett Forster hitting 1 and 2. So you kind of get backed into a corner where you get forced to pitch to one of the two of them. And like Garrett Forster had 5 hits in one game. And my first reaction was like, how do you let Garrett Forster do that? But because of the lineup construction, you kind of get shoved into that corner. So the Pac-12 is fascinating. Kendall and Joe, let's wrap with the Big 12. So I had Texas and TCU this weekend. Both teams give you a ton to love, and then some stuff to say like, man, that's a major concern. Like they're really, both teams are a wild ride. And like the best version of them, like Texas with Lucas Gordon on the mound, you're like, oh hell yeah, like give me anybody, right? Like because he's so good. The changeup's got a 50% swing and miss rate. They're very solid. Texas is not sexy, but they play catch. They put the ball in play. There's good at bats 1 through 9. But then when Lucas Gordon's not on the mound, you really don't know what you're getting. TCU has got all these really interesting freshmen who are very talented. Anyway, here's my question for you guys. If I were to say to you, Kendall and Joe, and Fitzy, you can answer this too. I'm going to give you, win the Big 12 regular season title. You can have West Virginia and Kansas State, or you can have the field with 3 weeks to play. You can have West Virginia and Kansas State, or you can have the field. Joseph, who would you like?
Dead air is always good podcasting.
Short, Texas. Say it again.
I said always good podcasting. Dead air. Cut and shoot, Texas. By the way,
cut and shoot.
Because cutting short just wouldn't make any
sense.
Give
me. I'll take West Virginia or Kansas State. I think when you look at West Virginia right now, guys, is a game and a half ahead of Oklahoma State. They have the head-to-head series win, and they finished with Kansas State at home and at Oklahoma. I like their chances there to hold on to that conference lead.
Joe,
yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's the direction I was going to go. I mean, I just think no one in this league has really shown a ton of consistency, so I think it's valuable that West Virginia has the kind of lead that it does right now. And I think it's, no disrespect to West Virginia, because their talent is real, and we could sit here and go through it one by one, but we've talked about them before. But the fact that they have a game and a half lead in the standings and that Kansas State is right there in the mix, I think goes to show that those are teams. And look, this is what you have to do when you're teams like Kansas State and West Virginia that don't have some of the advantages of Texas and Oklahoma State and Oklahoma and TCU, there's rebuilding clubs in this conference. Texas is one of them. Oklahoma is one of them. Baylor is clearly one of them, right? And those teams are taking advantage, and that's kind of what you have to do in this league. There's history of, K-State and even KU in some instances. The years when the Big 12 is rebuilding, those teams have to take advantage and kind of pop up, and they've done that. So I think there's a lot of negativity about the Big 12. I've been a part of that. I'm not pointing fingers at everyone else. Like, I've talked about it too, just like, man, somebody in the Big 12, please step up. But the flip side of that is that, and I think Kendall put this in our internal WhatsApp conversation over the weekend, that the Big 12 tournament actually might be kind of fun for different reasons, right? I mean, maybe there's not going to be a team out there that we're just going to be able to gawk at and like, oh, this team is awesome. Like, some of the great Texas teams or Oklahoma State teams of the past or Texas Tech teams. But it might just be a total free-for-all where there's just so much at stake for every team involved. And that can be a lot of fun too.
Love it. Fitzy,
can I just make a comment real quick? That I was actually looking at Oklahoma State's remaining schedule.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, that is Oklahoma State's remaining schedule. So I actually still like West Virginia's remaining schedule. They have Oklahoma at home, Texas Tech at home, which at this point, like, I'm not so sure I really believe in Texas Tech very much. And then they're at Texas to finish the regular season. So I actually think I'll still take them. I think they'll win those 2 home series.
Yeah, I've become a believer in West Virginia now as well. And you know who else I believe in to quickly throw a curveball in here at the last minute is the Maryland Terrapins, gentlemen.
Yes.
Going on the road, sweeping Indiana. They've won 8 straight series, something like that. They've won a road series at Iowa, a road series at Indiana. They've won 2 or 3 against Rutgers. Really all the contenders that we kind of thought in this league.
Yeah,
they're cruising. They're 11-4. They're only a game up in the standings, but they're in first place, and the remaining schedule is very favorable. Maryland, man, I mean, just credit these guys for, kind of a rough start. I mean, for a team coming off the year that they had last year, hosting a regional and having a decent amount of talent back, but still having a little bit of depth concerns in the mound, and we've talked about that. And then the first few weeks, I mean, lose a series at Ole Miss, they go 0-3 at Cambria, and it's like, do they have enough? They were 4-7 after 3 weeks, and now look at them. They're clearly the class of the Big Ten. They're back in the top 25. They're just I'm in. They're for real.
I was reminded this weekend, Butch Thompson gave me a great quote of, he just said simply, very matter-of-factly, players are allowed to get better. He was referring to his pitching staff, right? But I think this is a classic example of like teams are allowed to get better. I think, and I'm guilty of this as anybody. Like we draw conclusions very quickly during the season, and the season is fairly short, right? I mean, it's 56 games is a pretty small sample, but it is also long enough that a team can be really different in May. And by the way, I just referenced Auburn. Auburn is one of those teams, right? Like I think I left them for dead. Probably if you go back at a Highway Hoover episode, I probably said something leaving them for dead a few weeks ago, and here they are. So it's just a great reminder that, teams sometimes take some time to gel, and there is time for that to happen.
I would argue this as well. Like Oklahoma State for me is like the Tennessee of the Big 12. Like I feel like they're one of those teams that, like, you may look at them now and you look at their resume in conference, you're like, man, they've got some bad series losses, but I would not want them in my regional.
Seriously, they're going to
roll. Like if I'm Arkansas and I go Oklahoma State, like I'm not happy. Yeah, and they'll get McClain back. Like he'll be healthy. Like he'll be 100% healthy when he comes back.
Crazy,
great call, boys, Kendall. That's a great call.
That is a great call. By the way, boys, just to finish the thought on Maryland, April of 2021 was the last time they lost a Big Ten series, and it may not be until 2024 that they lose a Big Ten series. Like it is unreal. They could go 3 years without. Yeah.
And by the way, somebody asked me today in the chat if they had a shot to host. They could win out the rest of the year, and they still would not get in the top 32. So probably not going to happen. I mean, I guess they could win every game of the conference tournament. It may sneak in there in that 23 to 25 range, but it's going to be hard.
Yep. Boys, well done. Let's cut it right there. We're just under an hour. You guys we got to keep your pitch counts under control for the
Joe's got to get his wagers in.
Yeah, that's right. Kendall's got to do some research, some Googling on straight up money odds betting, etc. That'll be fun.
Some bookies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Kendall's Googling.
I'll call the Golden Nugget in Lake Charles.
Only
Joe knows what I'm referencing.
Listen, just go up to Cut and Shoot. I'm sure they got some illicit sports booking.
Cut and Shoot may be better in Lake Charles.
Yeah. Cut and Shoot, Texas feels like an area that rules itself. Very good. Gentlemen, well done. Hey, we'll be back here for the Wednesday night weekend preview. And that is it. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.